Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum. We are discussing about structure or organizational framework of the United Nations. I have already explained you about the General Assembly, its role, composition, functions. Today I explain you about second most important organ of the United Nations, and that is the Security Council. The Security Council is the most important organ of the United Nations. It also can be considered as a chief executive body of the United Nations. The Security Council is often described as the enforcement wing of the United Nations. It is primarily responsible for the maintenance of international peace and security. For this purpose, its services can be attained anytime. This naturally implies that the Security Council has to work continuously so that it can take quick action in the event of threat to international peace or security. Now we examine about composition of the Security Council. The Security Council is a much smaller body than the General Assembly. Initially, it comprised of 11 members, 5 permanent members and 6 non-permanent members elected by the General Assembly for a term of 2 years. The strength of the non-permanent members was raised 6 to 10 in 1965. So, at present, the Security Council comprises of 15 members, 5 permanent members and 10 non-permanent members. The 5 permanent members are China, France, Russia, USA and United Kingdom. Now we examine about voting procedure of the Security Council. Each member of the Security Council has a right of one vote. According to the article number 27 of the Charter, decision-making procedures are explained. Decisions on procedural matters are taken by affirmative vote of at least 9 members, while decisions on substantive matters are taken by the votes of 9 members, which must also contain the concurring votes of all the permanent members. The presidency of the Security Council is held by each member of the Security Council in alphabetical order for a period of 1 month. Functions and powers of the Security Council. The United Nations Charter has explained the responsibility of maintenance of international peace and security to the Security Council. For this purpose, all the members of the United Nations are committed to carry out the decision of the Security Council. During this discussion, One point is very important, that powers of Security Council made it most important organ of the United Nations. Security Council also has the power to discuss and investigate any dispute or situation and make recommendation to the member states to settle their disputes by peaceful means. Disputes or situations likely to endanger international peace and security may be brought to the attention of the Security Council by any member of the United Nations, by the General Assembly, or by the Secretary General. Even non-member state can also bring the dispute before the Security Council, provided they accept in advance the obligations of peaceful settlement contained in the United Nations Charter. It may be noted that a state which is a member of the United Nations but not of the Security Council can also take part in the proceedings of the Security Council when it is considering a matter which affects the interest of that country. Even a state which is not a member of the United Nations can be invited to take part in the discussions of the Security Council if it is a party to the dispute being considered by the Security Council. However, such states cannot take part in voting. The Security Council can also take up general questions regarding maintenance of international peace and security. It is responsible for framing plans for the establishment of a system for the control of armaments. The United Nations Atomic Energy Commission was set up by virtue of a revolution of the General Assembly, but it is responsible to and operates under the supervision of the Security Council. The Security Council has also been vested with important enforcement powers. When the Security Council finds that a peaceful settlement among the disputant countries is not possible, it can decide upon measures which it considers necessary for the maintenance of order and restoration of international peace and security. On account of this power, the Security Council is often described as the enforcement arm of the United Nations. While taking up the measures, Security Council first tries to resolve the dispute without involving the use of armed forces. For this purpose, it can adopt measures like complete or partial interruption of economic relations, severing of rail, sea, air, postal, radio, and other communication links, and snapping of diplomatic relations. When these measures fail to produce the desired effect, then the Security Council can take such action by air, sea, or land forces as may be necessary for the maintenance or restoration of international peace and security. Such actions may include the blockades, demonstrations, and other operations by air, sea, or land forces of members of the United Nations. Next most important point of this discussion is that though the Security Council can urge the member nations to apply sanctions against the aggressor, there is no guarantee that the states will answer the call. In this regard, Article number 43 of the United Nations Charter enjoins upon all members of the United Nations to make available to the Security Council on its call and in accordance with the special agreement or agreements armed forces assistance and facilities including rights of passage necessary for the purpose of maintaining peace and security. However, such agreements could not be concluded due to differences among the superpowers, and thus these provisions have remained inoperative. To assist the Security Council on all questions relating to its military requirements for the maintenance of international peace and security, a military staff committee has been established. This staff committee also assists the Security Council with regard to employment and command of forces at its disposal, the regulation of armaments and possible disarmament. This committee comprises of the chief of staffs of the permanent members of Security Council or their representatives. It may be observed also that though the Charter grants the states the right to have recourse to individual or collective self defense in the event of an armed attack against them, they are not expected to exercise this right until the Security Council has taken measures necessary to maintain international peace and security. So, the main thrust of the enforcement duties of the Council is to work for the specific terms for the settlement of disputes and to work for the maintenance of international peace and security. And during this discussion, a next most important aspect about the Security Council is its electoral functions. The Security Council enjoys extensive electoral powers which pertain to admission of new members and the constitution of other organs of the United Nations. The new members of the world body can be admitted by the General Assembly only on the recommendations of the Security Council. By virtue of this power, the Security Council refused to recommend admission of different countries in the history of the United Nations. The Security Council also takes part in the election of the judges of International Court of Justice. It also makes recommendations regarding the appointment of the Secretary General, and recommendations of the Security Council is also essential for the suspension of a member of the United Nations by the General Assembly. So, overall, all most important decisions required recommendations of General Assembly along with the General along with the Security Council. If we examine overall role of the Security Council in the system of the United Nations, then we find out that through the Charter of the United Nations, Charter made the Security Council the most important, most central, most unique organ of the United Nations. It has not been able to play the role which was assigned through the Charter. Since its inception, the Security Council has not only held few sessions, but the scope of the political issues considered by it has considerably narrowed down. Palmer and Perkins have rightly observed their views in these words. Although the Security Council was envisioned as the central agency of the United Nations, it has not been able to play its expected role. The reason is clear. Instead of great power unanimity on which the United Nations was predicted, the post war years have brought major rights and disagreements among the most powerful states of the world. Under these circumstances, the Security Council, in which 5 permanent members possess an individual veto, has been unable to function effectively. Since the Korean War and the return of the Russian representative to the Security Council on 1st August 1950, the Council has faded into background and its place has been taken in considerable measure by the General Assembly, which was not designed to play major role in the security field. In the light of Palmer and Perkins' views, we can analyze that veto power and right of veto of big superpowers or permanent members of the security become a major cause of the failure or of the ineffectiveness of the Security Council. Next most important point is that one major factor contributed to the reduction of the importance of the Security Council in the 1950s, adoption of resolution of uniting for peace by the General Assembly, which provided that if the Security Council fails to exercise its primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security due to the lack of unanimity of the permanent members, the matter shall be immediately considered by the General Assembly with a view to make appropriate recommendations to the members for collective measures. This resolution made the General Assembly the ultimate custodian of collective security and rendered Security Council less effective. Furthermore, we cannot deny a major regional organization their role and their interference in the collective security measures such as NATO in the past, Warsaw and CETO Treaty and other regional organizational. So the growth of these alliances was not only indicative of lack of unity among permanent members of the Security Council, but also lack of confidence of the members of the Security Council as an instrument of collective security. Overall, Security Council played and playing and will play its important role. If we examine in past eras, then we find out that in the 1960s, Security Council started playing more effective role towards the maintenance of peace and security, particularly during the Congo crisis of 1960. Most important decisions were taken by the Security Council, and again in October 1962 during the Cuban crisis the Security Council played a leading role. In 1964 on the issue of Cyprus, Security Council also took the decision to send peacekeeping forces to take over the responsibility from the British forces. In the subsequent years, also the Security Council continued to play effective role in the resolution or handling of various disputes such as question of South Africa and Rhodesia, war in Vietnam in 1966, the Arab-Israel War of 1967, India-Pakistan War of 1971, and conflict in Middle East in 73. The growing importance of the Security Council in the 1960s further evident from the fact that the number of non-permanent members was raised and from 6 to 10 and to provide greater representation to the newly independent countries of Asia and Africa. Security Council, it is very necessary that Security Council must be made an effective body as originally mentioned in the Charter of the United Nations. For this purpose, it is proposed its powers should be revised, the composition of the Security Council should be changed, the system of veto should be replaced by equal voting rights for all members of the Security Council. It is also suggested that the Security Council can be made more effective by making greater use of informal techniques like private meetings of the Council, the appointment of conciliators, and by making a bid to reconcile the conflicting interests of the parties before the issue actually comes up for consideration before the Security Council. While concluding this topic, if we assess the functioning and contributions of the Security Council, then we find out that at the time of inauguration of the United Nations Charter, high hopes were expressed about the capacity of the Security Council to maintain international peace and security post Second World War period. But practically, actual practices, performance during the last 74 years has been far less impressive. No doubt the United Nations Charter had called upon all members of the United Nations to make available to the Security Council armed forces, assistance and facilities, but this arrangement has proved quite unworkable and the members could not reach any agreement on the composition of a United Nations force. Even if such a force had been created, it would not have been possible to make effective use of such force due to differences among permanent five members of the Security Council due to their national interest, due to their power politics, due to their ideological conflicts, and due to their overall benefits and interest in world affairs. It is true that the Security Council has not been able to play an effective enforcement role. Its central position in the international area cannot be denied. Whenever there is any conflict, the member states turn to the Security Council. Even if the Security Council is not able to immediately halt the fighting or resolve the dispute, it certainly brings to bear the weight of outside opinion and prevents further aggravation of the situation. It helps in tiding over the crisis situations by encouraging the individual power and groups of nations to find a negotiated settlement. Quite often, the Security Council succeeded in achieving consensus on issues like Cyprus, Congo, and Middle East to some extent, where the interests of the powers were not too divergent. It is true that on other issues where the interests of big powers were difficult to reconcile, it could not achieve much success in various issues such as Kashmir issue, Palestine issue, and all other issues which related to the Muslim world and developing countries. The Security Council, whose position had been somewhat undermined following adoption of the Uniting for Peace resolution in 1950, has started reasserting itself in recent years. Its role on the question of Kuwait and Iraq war, its role in Korean War, its role in South African War, and overall in different issues, Security Council played its important role. The Security Council can also play even more effective role in future if the strength of the permanent member is increased and seats are provided to the countries like Japan, Germany, Brazil, and Muslim bloc and other states of the world. While concluding this topic, we came to an end by saying that Despite the all drawbacks mentioned already in this discussion, despite all critical aspects, despite all weaknesses, the Security Council is still a powerful institution responsible for the maintenance of international peace and security. It is the custodian of collective security. It is guarantor of peace. It has a vital role to play in near future. In certain quarters, it has been felt that the Security Council must be made an effective body as it was originally explained by the United Nations Charter. For this purpose, it is proposed that its powers should be revised, its composition also should be revised and enhanced and changed. The system of veto should be replaced by equal voting rights for all the members of the Security Council. It is also suggested that to make the Security Council more effective, greater importance should be attached to informal techniques like private meetings of the council, appointment of conciliators who should make a bid to reconcile the conflicting interests of the parties before the issue comes up for consideration before the Security Council. Overall, Security Council of the United Nations can be considered as a most effective and central and according to its powers a most powerful organ, a most powerful body of the United Nations. And its criticism, its contributions, all reflections of the performance of the Security Council is depend upon the role of its members, particularly role of 5 permanent members. So that is the end of our today's discussion.